right, welcome again, everybody. I am back with Scott Roos, and we are going to talk about about manifesting and mindset and how that relates to Vedic astrology and what helps you and where it might be challenging. And I say this as somebody who's done a lot of vision boards and feng shui red folders and things like that. And there is one image that I will say gets things rolling for me when I meditate with it. But the only thing I have ever gotten out of a vision board or feng shui red folder is a toaster, which I totally could have purchased for myself at any other time. And I just put it in the folder and eventually broke down and bought it. And so welcome again, Scott.
Thank you. And should I just start going blah, blah, blah? Should I start talking?
Yes. Yeah. Just go ahead and start talking. Yeah. No, so I'm curious just what, because I've been studying Vedic astrology with in your classes. And I will say if I hadn't done the amount of self-work I've done on myself, I would be really angry that I didn't know about Vedic astrology earlier in my life because it explains everything.
Aw.
And, and I don't think, I love Western astrology and I understand what it explains too, but Vedic astrology has such a predictive value for events.
Yes, it can be very insightful and incisive in its analyses and its ability to see forward and backward, for sure.
Yes. And so what makes it, so manifesting and mindset and things like that are very popular right now and very mainstream words that we're hearing everywhere. And it's always been clear to me that there's clearly something that makes this much more easier for some people and something that makes it way harder for others.
Yeah, I think what you're trying to say is it works sometimes and it doesn't seem to work other times.
Right. And I think that
people and doesn't seem to work for other people.
Doesn't seem to work for others, or it seems like, right. And so what is that and so I'm curious what insight Vedic astrology has to offer on that, or even yoga philosophy, which I guess there's really kind of the same thing.
Well, what you have to do is jump to the Vedic astrology is a very particular form that operates in the sea of the karmic theory. And so karmic theory exists in the whole Vedic tradition. It permeates all the different aspects of the Vedic sciences, including Ayurveda, including yoga philosophy. So karma theory is there. And to really answer the question about, well, when does mindset and setting intention work? And when does it not work? We have to really unpack the whole sea of karma and understand what the tradition says about karma. And so first off, the tradition says that there are three broad stroke types of karma. There's dridha karma, which is fixed karma, which means it's not going to change. There are certain things in your life that just will not change. And certain events that will happen, and then they're just destined. Well, destined is probably not the right word, but they're going to happen. Fixed karma, right? And one of the easiest ways to see fixed karma, well, your family is your fixed karma, right? Who your mom is, well, that's really not going to change, right? Who is your dad? Well, that's really not going to change. Who are your siblings? Well, that's not going to change. Those are your siblings. You might make friends who become like siblings, but your siblings are your siblings. Those are your fixed karmas, right? And the example I like to use for fixed karma is Bill Gates's children will never be poor, It's their karma to be wealthy. They're going to have money because there's going to be some trust fund set up that will give them a payment every month. And it doesn't matter how hard they spend that money. If they wanted to try to be poor, they would be rich the next month. And I don't know if that's the case. I'm just making that up. I don't know anything about Bill Gates's children, but that's an example that kind of makes sense to people. Then you have dridha karma, which means it's fixed and unfixed, which is, we translate as kind of fixed karma. If you're born with a stutter, right? You could just say, oh, well, I'm born with a stutter. I'm going to stutter my whole life. Or you can work on it. And you can go see the speech therapist and the speech pathologist, and you can get the electrodes hooked up to your throat and get the stimulated part of your vocal cords so you can learn how to use them again and do all this work. Or if you have a hair lip, you can go have 22 surgeries to get it fixed. So there are parts of your life that, you're born and it seems like, this is a struggle, and it is a struggle, but with a lot of hard work and perseverance and energy in a particular direction, you can change it or severely ameliorate it, make it a lot better. And so you might still have a little stutter, and it only comes out occasionally. But when you were a kid, you couldn't complete a sentence, right? So you had this kind of fixed karma, this dridha karma, and you worked on it and you overcame it. And then there's areas of everyone's life where you have unfixed karma, adridha karma. And in those areas of life, free will reigns. Well, what am I going to do today? I think I'll do this. I'm going to go to the hardware store and pick up, woodworking or something. Okay, fine. Unless there's fixed karma where you're clumsy, you'll be okay woodworking. You can pick that up. You can pick up a hobby. That usually hobbies, not always, but sometimes hobbies are unfixed karmas. And where Vedic astrology comes in is it can start to identify which areas of life you have fixed karmas and which areas of life you have mostly fixed karmas and which areas of life you have unfixed karmas. Okay, and in Vedic astrology, you have these patterns of combinations of planets, and these patterns are called yogas. And with these yogas, you can see patterns of fixed karma, and you can see when they're activated. There's a whole timeline. You say, oh, look at this. This fixed karma gets activated now. So that's kind of the backdrop on Vedic astrology and how it works. So that being said, there's also 4 other categories of karma. So the first category of karma is sanchita karma, which is the heap of all the karmas in your life. And remember, karma is cause and effect. It's your action and its consequence. It's not just consequence. Okay, so what am I doing every day? Every day I make new karmas. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a second. But first off, for karma, there's all the karmas that you've accrued. If you believe in past lives, all the karmas you've accrued in all your lifetimes. Then there's this subset of that karma called kriyamana karma. No, sorry, it's called prarabdha karma, which is the karma that bears fruit in this lifetime. Okay, and we see that in the natal horoscope. The natal horoscope tells us prarabdha karma, the karma that's going to come into fruit, the effects of your actions in previous lifetimes that's going to come to bear in this lifetime, and when. Then there's a set of karmas called kriyamana karma. And kriyamana karma is where things get interesting, because it's the actions I do this lifetime that have effects in this lifetime and in the next lifetime. Okay. And so at all times, yes, I was born with a particular horoscope and particular karmas, but maybe I've been working really hard. Maybe I've been meditating really hard. Maybe I've been doing yoga classes or something. Maybe I've been, studying very hard or whatnot. to change my karmas in a particular direction. So the birth horoscope isn't the end all and be all of your life, because throughout your life, you've been doing work. I did a horoscope reading for someone and I said, oh, it looks like you hold back on your emotions and you're not good at sharing your emotions. He says, well, yes, I started that way, but and she said, I've gone through all these trainings. And now I teach people how to share their emotions. I'm like, okay, that's good. Because she put effort there. So I saw a pattern that she was born with, and she is working to overcome that pattern. I'm not convinced she completely overcame that pattern, but she's still working on it, which is good. But now we come to where the mindset comes into place. There's a fourth type of karma. So we have sanchita karma, the whole of all your karmas from all lifetimes. We have prarabdha karma, is the karma that you come into this lifetime with. And then we have kriyamana karma, is the actions that you take in this lifetime. And then lastly, there is agama karma. And this where it gets interesting. Agama karma is the karma of intentions. So when you set an intention for yourself, that is an action that has a consequence. Sounds cool, right? And that's where Indian traditions get the whole thing where you consult an astrologer before getting married. Okay? Because you want to pick a good time for the marriage. Because the time you pick for the marriage, that setting that intention of the time and its alignment with the stars gives it a little, if it's done right, it can give it a little boost in a positive direction. When you want to start a business, when you want to move into a home, all these things are things that you might set an intention with. And by setting a right time, you can make that transition all the much better. However, that intention, karma, and you can set an intention, okay, today I'm going to eat healthy. And that's an intention. You set that, that's an action with its consequence. But that's like 5% effectiveness or 10% effectiveness, considering the whole rest of all these other karmas that are taking place. And so this is the very long way of short answering. Does setting intention work? Does doing that mindset stuff work? Well, it depends on what your karmas are and in which area of your life you're setting that intention for. So you can set an intention to be rich all you want, but if your only skill is, serving at Juan's Flying Burrito, well, setting that intention isn't going to change things considerably, because maybe you have this fixed karma. Not that there's anything wrong with working at Juan's, because I love Juan's Flying Burrito, but setting your intention might not be enough.
So for those of you listening in other cities, that's a local restaurant here in New Orleans. A very delicious one. Yes.
And so, but if you set your intention and you already have the karmas in alignment, and you're already coming up on a time period in your life where something's already going to manifest itself, well, then setting that intention, you're going to think, wow, I exploded onto the scene. Setting this intention really works. But if you set an intention and it really goes against fixed karmas that are in play at the moment, it's not going to do very much. Yeah, go ahead, ask your question.
I was gonna say, I think that's been a large part of my experience and personally with manifesting techniques. And I won't say that, I've created a very comfortable life for myself. I can't, complain in a lot of ways, but when I feel like if I try to create something that isn't mine or isn't my, if I feel like and I could explain maybe what would be considered fixed karma based on, like, for example, my human design astrology, like like they would say, like, my subconscious and conscious north node are exactly the same. Like, I'm on this just fixed path that I can't which in that paradigm is unusual. And so, and was soothing to me when I learned that, because I've often felt like I was just banging my head against the wall. And, and I just wrote a blog this morning on how, about the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is certainly having a heyday in the media right now. And I've been screaming vagus nerve into the wind for 20 years.
Wow.
And so it's just really interesting to me who gets really, where the information gets picked up and where it doesn't, right. Because I know the world needs what I have to say about this. and it's different from what other people are, a different perspective and approach than what other people are using. And so I've just, personally, I've surrendered to go, okay, I've just asked for what's mine in this world to show up. I'll do whatever work the universe puts in front of me.
Well, that's good. I'm just thinking, my astrology teacher, Hart DeVoe, used to say, why are extraordinary people so extraordinary? And the answer is because there are so few of them. And what he meant by that is not that, oh, you're not extraordinary, I'm not extraordinary. No, that's not what he meant. What he meant was the ability to influence a large number of people in a particular direction is a rare trait. And for us peasants in the world, we have to go out and do our dharma and do our good deeds and do our good works in the spheres that we're given. And so your conclusion to do what's given to me is a good conclusion, because ultimately we really don't want that extraordinary life as much as we think we do. Because that extraordinary life comes with it such pressures and such pitfalls and such politics that it lends itself very easily to an unhappy existence. And that having the smaller spheres, we actually can play more and have more freedom and have more time to relax and have more enjoyment and have more genuine relationships. And so that's actually a gift, even though we think we want that extraordinary life where, I want to be the president, or no, that would be terrible. That would be the worst job ever. Because then literally people are out trying to shoot you. Like I go through my life every day with no one trying to shoot me. So things are good. At least as far as I know.
Well, I think that freedom is I agree, because I think that I'll say, at least here in the US, we get freedom is just implicit in our way of being. And I think it's interesting because this the article I wrote that I referenced earlier was specifically about vagus nerve freedom. And it's and I think there is this, the freedom is really a satisfying, makes life satisfying when you have some freedom of expression, or to show up with yourself, however full that is, or in whatever way. When you have to always, I agree with you, the president of the United States sounds like a terrible job to me, or a very challenging one that I wouldn't wish upon myself or the people closest to me, because it does come with so many, that you always have Secret Service and everything has to be scoped out, and you interrupt traffic everywhere you go. And and that it's just like, you're never going to be everybody's favorite person.
Right. No, but I mean, you want to be able to roam and affect that sphere of people and help that sphere of people that you can help. And if you're working as a healer or as a practitioner, as a teacher, well, you want to teach those people that come to you. Right. And it's okay. You don't have to teach the world. And it's okay. Okay. I deal with what you deal with in the vagus nerve all the time. Is 20 years you've been shouting vagus nerve. 20 years I've been shouting Ayurveda. And people are just discovering, oh, I just discovered that this thing of Ayurveda is true. Oh, leaky gut syndrome. Oh, have you been talking about that for 3,000 years? Well, Ayurveda has, in a way, in its own language. Ayurveda has been talking about the causes of illness in its own language, and it feels like no one's listening, but people are listening is the thing. But it's just not the wider, it's people who come to you will listen. It's those.
Right. Well, and I think there's sometimes we really minimize, if we're going to think about thought leadership, for example, or think about doing work 10 or 20 years ahead of when the masses have really caught on to it. That if you think about it in quantum physics terms, you're really seeding the quantum field.
Right. In the collective unconscious, you're putting that information into the collective so that someone else who's extraordinary who
right,
can
picks it up and does something else with it, right?
Picks it up and does something else with it. Now, I remember Borges, a Spanish author. Do you know Borges? Luis Borges. I might be saying his name. But he was a Spanish author who was never trained in science and basically was talking about things that were developed out of quantum physics. And he had never studied quantum physics. He didn't know anything about quantum physics, but as an author, he had somehow connected and was able to have ideas relating to conclusions drawn from quantum physics in his writing, which was incredible. And so, I think there's this kind of quantum field. And yes, if you're putting the ideas out there, hopefully someone else will pick up on it. I like that.
And I think, in my work, I think we don't realize where science is coded into our storytelling and into our sort of collective consciousness at different levels. Like I read the myth of the Nemean lion, which is associated with the Leo constellation in Western astrology. And I see it as it's the story of blood flow through the heart. It's about heart valves.
Oh, no way. Amazing.
And that, and so these things that we think are just fiction or just a story, I think are really so much more than that. And good storytelling takes us through the same neurotransmitter sequence that we need for change.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, so I think that, we're, we have this incredible reverence for modern medicine and modern science collectively. And it's out there in other ways. And like the story of, like in the Vedic tradition, the story of Ram is really a story of anatomy and physiology. According to Tony Nader, who's an MD, Harvard MD, PhD, and head of the Transcendental Meditation Foundation. So these things exist in multiple, like I think we're always interacting at a bigger place than we know, than we think, than we realize we're having a bigger influence than we think.
We might be having more effect on the world than we think we're having.
Yes. And to see the, kind of like where you're, at one time or another, we're all Atlas holding up the celestial spheres, even if it feels like punishment, and maybe it's a gift.
And it's also good to know that, not everything the whole society embraces is necessarily a good thing. In and of itself. I am not for example, I'm not a fan of Bikram yoga. I think that it's calling it yoga makes people think that all yoga is this vigorous exercise where you get all sweaty and you get an adrenaline rush afterwards, and you feel physically great afterwards, and I've done yoga now. And it's for me, it's the epitome of what yoga shouldn't become. Yoga should be meditative and cause you to examine your relationships in your life and your relationships with yourself, and free you up from the bad self narratives that you've been telling yourself, and open you up to better narratives and change on a physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual especially level. That's a new definition of yoga I just threw out into the world. And I made the mistake of getting into one of these, Facebook discussion groups, and I said something, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika says that the yogi should avoid heat, and and the guy responded, well, 10 millions of people are doing Bikram. You're obviously wrong. And what I wanted to say is, well, millions of people are also doing cocaine. Are they right too?
My physical therapy background phrase around that is, just because it's common doesn't mean that it's normal.
Right. Oh, that's good. I like that.
Like people think, well, back pain's normal, or it's, normal to have a leaky bladder after a baby, or it's normal to, for my neck to hurt or whatever. And that's not normal. It's common, but it's absolutely not how you were designed.
Not how we're designed. And my astrology teacher was actually big on this topic, in that he was convinced we were not supposed to work a 40-hour work week. Just as humans, we're not designed to kind of slave away for other people for super long periods of time.
And nobody should work on Mondays, because that's the moon's day, and that's all about self-care. You're like, wait, what day of the week has the reputation for being the most dreaded? It's Mondays.
Right. And we should actually be, getting our massages and drinking our milk on Mondays. So much. I mean, modern lifestyle has so many amazing innovations, but my astrology teacher was always convinced that we were devolving instead of evolving, away from our true selves, and away from structures and habits and rituals that support our meaningful lives, as opposed to getting involved in technology where we're no longer living in a way that's good for us.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think living, we definitely don't live in accordance with the cycles of nature anymore. And ancient and indigenous systems are not valued as highly as our modern science. And granted, and I'll be the first to say, modern medicine does some really amazing things, especially acute care medicine. Chronic care medicine struggles a little bit more. If you look at the statistics,
right?
Chronic care medicine, if you look at the statistics on loneliness, addiction, and chronic pain, you can make the case that we're not moving forward. And this, while social justice has really become such a big word in the last term, and there's so many fantastic things happening in that arena, there's not really justice yet going on for indigenous science and for ancient science and for these other paradigms that we could hold hand in hand with modern science and create something better, that it doesn't have to be competitive. You can really see how, to really find out where they can be collaborative with each other.
No, that would be fantastic. And some of that is happening. I did some research on breathing and stress for my dissertation, and a lot of people are out there doing research on pranayama, slow breathing. They're literally taking yoga tradition and yoga practitioners, learning the techniques, teaching them to other people, and then doing studies, intervention studies, to find out, what are demonstrable effects in experiments. And it's great to see. And I even did one of those experiments, where I taught heads of school, heads of grammar schools and heads of high schools, slow breathing, pranayama, and looked at how it affected their stress levels. And it actually had profound benefits on them, just from the experiment that I did. Profound reduction in stress, and they became better leaders as a result of the breathing, just because they had time to kind of, from the vagus nerve paradigm, they had time to activate their parasympathetic nervous system and process what was going on in their day, and have time.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, I'll say beyond stimulating the vagus nerve, you're breathing, particularly in pranayama, I would say mechanically frees up your vagus nerve if it's stuck.
Oh,
That
wow.
it's not just about the electrical signal, that it's about the mechanics of how you breathe when you do that, that are also greatly, because if you're breathing the wrong way, it's not helpful. Or if you can't outrun bad breathing mechanics.
So what are, in your paradigm, what are good breathing mechanics? What does that mean for our listeners?
Oh, for me, that's really having more of a 360-degree breath. That, like, if you put a hand on your chest and the back of your hand on the back of your chest, and you take a deep inhale, that you get expansion forward and back, that you have nice expansion side to side, that you can breathe into one side of your rib cage, keeping the other one still, and
Wow.
not have to move both at the same time, that you have independent movement right and left rib cage. Most people that I have seen over the years are breathing almost entirely with their neck and shoulders.
Wow.
And even if they're breathing diaphragmatically, they can put the breath down and they put it forward, but they can't put it back. The backside of their diaphragm is locked up. They have no idea how to use it. They don't know where it is.
Right. They don't have
And
any interoception. What do
no
you call it?
interoception, no proprioception, like all of that is not online. And your vagus nerve mechanically can get trapped at the top opening of your ribs at the level of the collarbones. It can get trapped on the backside of your heart as it goes through the posterior mediastinum, and it can get trapped as it goes through the diaphragm to go into your abdomen.
And so with just a slight adjustment to awareness, or just a slight physical adjustment from a practitioner, you can actually free up someone's stuck nerve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the nerve functions a lot better, and you're breathing better when you're not. Well, what happens when you're breathing too much with your neck muscles, you're telling your brain that you're running from a predator, or that you're telling your brain you're in fight and flight, because those are the only time that, like, in heavy exertion is really when the only time you're supposed to use those muscles. But many people breathe with them 21,000 times a day, every time they take a breath.
Wow. Okay, so those muscles might actually be stimulating the sympathetic nervous system.
Exactly. It's a movement pattern that your brain goes, oh, this is what happens when I need to run away from the saber-toothed tiger.
Mhm.
And so your body just thinks it's constantly running from the saber-toothed tiger. And eventually you're going to burn out, or you're going to get depressed. You're going to, you can stay anxious for a while, but it's, even that's not sustainable in the
Right.
long run. That most people get exhausted. If you're in that long enough, you get exhausted, or you go between anxiety and depression.
And that's why they often go together.
Yes. But if you can change how you move, and so much of what you teach in your classes with yoga and qigong is I recognize how much it really is mechanically freeing up the vagus nerve and promoting movements that tell your brain that you're safe.
Awesome. So if these indigenous practices like qigong end up being super helpful for keeping us healthy, if only because they free up the vagus nerve.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that's a huge part of it. I'm sure, so, I subscribe that they're doing more of that, but if I was going to describe it in just anatomical terms, and especially in biomechanical terms, just because that's my
Your wheelhouse.
expertise, that's my wheelhouse, that yes, it's promoting another way of movement. Like, we know that your posture changes your hormones. That if you stand like your favorite superhero for 2 minutes, you get elevated testosterone and lower cortisol. And so if you need a different physiology, and I think in whatever that is, like whether it's in overcoming food sensitivities or overcoming, a different kind of illness like cancer or whatever, that if you start to move like somebody that has the opposite of that, then you're going to change your enzyme secretions and all of, and your hormone secretions to help support that.
Awesome.
And I don't have all the evidence yet, but I've done it enough times with myself and with other people that I know that, I know that works, and tying back to manifesting, I think, for me, probably the most, rather than visualization and rather than, and and I'll say this also probably ties into how we all do what we need most to heal ourselves. But rather than visualization and red folders and all the, and mindset and all those kinds of things, I get more out of moving like somebody that has what I want and unloading the dishwasher like that and do it, it's tapping into that feeling and that sensibility and that frequency, that wavelength, that quantum, sort of feeling, or the, and then I think at some level I become my own Vedic remedy for the situation. Nice. Or my actions change and the way I move, the way I am, my being in the world starts to change. And so the world responds differently.
Right. No, I think we've come full circle in the conversation, because now we're back to acting with skill. And if, mindset is nice, but if we can figure out how to act with skill to change our karmas, and that's a kriya mana karma, that's going to be more effective than simply setting an intention. I mean, setting an intention might lead to us having skillful action, but finding that proper skillful action to change our circumstance is far, I think it's a better way to look at it than simply mindset. But you can, visualize your business being successful all day long, but maybe what you really need is a marketing consultant, someone who's an expert, and simply hiring that person might be what you need rather than all the mindset work. And I'm not talking about you, but I'm just talking in general.
Oh, absolutely. No, I hear you, because there is this, staying in your own zone of genius,
right,
and in your own gifts, and not trying to be maybe good at something you're not, or, letting somebody else fully express, have their fearless presence with their gifts in your business is going to have a much bigger effect.
Exactly. And so getting that skillful help is going to be more important, I think, than mindset for a lot of people, because that mindset karma, that agama karma, is only about 5%. And those people who have wild successes, I think they also have the fixed karma coming forward, and they're just leading into that.
Right. No, I've often thought that people get into manifestation when the energy is lined up for the things that they want to happen, and it just supports the thing that's already
correct
there. The last thing I want to touch on is you don't call it this, but kind of like 4 fixed karmas or 4 more difficult situations is how Vedic astrology offers some strategies to kind of break those spells or break
So a
the
fixed
cycle.
karma can't be broken. I'll give you an example. My astrology teacher was the astrologer for who is the drummer of the Beatles?
Yeah, Ringo Starr.
It was Ringo Starr. And Ringo had fixed karma for fame. Nothing he could do could make him unfamous, right? Nothing. But guess what Ringo wanted?
Anonymity.
Who
For sure.
wanted to be unfamous because he was tired of fame. Fame brought him money and wealth and all sorts of benefits, but he realized the golden handcuffs that came with fame. He couldn't walk anywhere he wanted. He couldn't go to the groceries, like he couldn't go to the movies. He couldn't go to the airport. Like he would be mobbed by people, et cetera, et cetera. And so he wanted to be not famous, and so he couldn't. But what he could do is he could be not famous next lifetime. And so with certain fixed karmas, what you can do is, well, I want to make sure my next lifetime, I don't have to go through that same fixed karma again. And you can do work, especially meditative work or mantra work with particular deities, setting intentions there and building energy with deities there can help to assure that next lifetime you don't necessarily have that fixed karma if you want to change it. The better thing, though, rather than, oh, I'm going to change it, is to accept it. Okay, because oftentimes much of our suffering comes from not accepting our fixed karmas. Oh, I'm famous, I'm just going to accept this, right? And changing your mindset towards it. Or, oh, for me, I have a ripped rotator cuff, I'm going to accept that. And they attempted to surgically repair it and couldn't, except for a little strand. And so, well, that's this body now. I'm going to accept it. And now I have the fixed karma of this body to live in. And I'll do my best with this body. And it might require more work on my part to make sure that the body stays functional because there's an asymmetry because of the torn muscle. And so getting your mindset around the fixed karmas is actually more important than trying to change them. But getting to accept it. I mean, you might have a mother or father who you don't particularly like. Well, accept that person. Or you might not have a mother or father. You have to accept that, right? Instead of comparing yourself to everyone who does have a mother and father, or a good mother and father, or a close relationship, like, oh, I'm so jealous of that person. Oh, if only my life were like that, it would be so much different. No, accept where your life is, and then you can create or co-create with your karmas a life that's better. Otherwise, you're just causing yourself suffering.
Well, and that's a lot of power to connect with, that, oh, you chose this life, you chose this karma, that this is part of, the power of our being.
Yeah.
At some level. But there was one, but what about for like more mutable karmas or those mixed karmas? There was a word that I'm not remembering right.
Dridha karma, which is kind of fixed karmas. And for those, you can use good skill and action and work on them. Skillful action to work, get professionals on board who are experts in the area of the karma you want to change. Okay, if you want to change your investment karma, well, and you're an innate gambler and you keep buying risky stocks, well, hire an expert and have that person say, no, this is a very safe investment.
Excellent.
And then
Excellent.
you're not losing your money all the time. So finding an expert in the areas you want to change is very important for those kind of fixed karmas, or those mostly fixed karmas.
Well, Scott, this has been another fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for your time. And put any questions you have for us in the comments or reach out to us online. My Instagram is embody your star. Let me say that again. My Instagram is embody your star. And Scott's, yours is?
It's Dr. Teacher Scott. Like Dr. Teacher Scott, but doctor is abbreviated as Dr. So Dr. Teacher Scott.
Awesome. All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.